G'day folks, well it's Vaughan McVilly here from the Mental Wheels Foundation, and I'm excited to be going live again today. Just let me get all of my bits and pieces going. We are good. Right, we're into it. Today I'm super duper excited. We've been doing a couple of these little sit-up lives, and I've been getting to interview some fantastic people, and today is a special one. I'm been pretty pumped about it, and I don't normally get that nervous doing these things because I can talk underwater with a mouthful of marbles most of the time. So today is a little bit of a different story. Today we're going to be joined by a luminary in the field of mental health research. He has an unwavering advocate for reducing the prevalence and burden for common mental health disorders in this country and around the world. His dedication for breaking down barriers to care and enhancing our understanding of the intricate connections between everyday actions and mental health is truly remarkable. He's a multi-award-winning professor, including the prestigious Exceptional Contribution Award from the Mental Health Services Learning Network for Australia and New Zealand. I am extremely privileged and I'm extremely honoured to be able to invite for a chat today, Professor Nick Titov. So I'll just invite him in. Got my morning routine done this morning. Went down, did the ice bath down in Bronte. So that was pretty exciting. And then came in here and started to get ready to chat to Nick, and there he is. Hello, mate.
G'day, Vaughan. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for making the time.
Oh, mate. Thank you so much. Mate, we've met a few times. I've told this story quite a few times, but I always remember the first time I met you was actually out at Macquarie University. It was one of our Mental Wheels Foundation board meetings, and Gareth, our founder, had already told me, he was like, "Oh, mate, you are going to love this guy." And I honestly, I just from that moment onwards, I've been a bit of a huge fan, I guess. So I'm pretty stoked and excited to have this chat. And I think just for the listeners out there, the reasoning for that is your work is amazing, but you're also you're passionate the way that you deliver the information to, I guess, blokes like me, and help us understand what's going on within the world of mental health is really inspiring. And I guess for my first question is, how did that all come about? Like primary, high school, into college, into university, that journey, how did you get to where you are now?
Well, firstly, Vaughan, thanks very much for your kind words. And can I say thanks to you guys at the Mental Wheels Foundation and Sit Up Challenge for your support of our work. It's great working with you guys, what you're doing, reaching everybody in the community, translating our messages, making them more accessible. We're all working together for the same goals. So a big thank you from me and the MindSpot team. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, mate.
Hey, look, in terms of journeys, gosh, well, as you know, we've all have mysterious ways of getting to a certain place. My most recent, I guess, adventure in research began when I moved to Australia from New Zealand in 2006. And my first job was working for this really enthusiastic psychiatrist. He was a senior psychiatrist, Professor Gavin Andrews, at St. Vincent's Hospital. And he was conducting a review of Australian mental health services. So this was a national review. And I landed this dream job. My job was to travel around the country. So first time really in Australia, to travel around the country and meet directors of mental health services, CEOs of different mental health services, and learn about what they were doing. And one of the findings from the report, no surprise, was that there were so many people requiring need that traditional models of care weren't going to work, and so we needed to develop new models. And Gavin was busy promoting online or internet treatments, and this is back in 2006. And I remember saying to Gavin on numerous occasions, look, boss, you can't do that. We don't have evidence. There's only a couple of places in the world where this is occurring, and Australia doesn't have evidence that these online treatments actually are effective. And I nagged him, and he got so frustrated with me that he said to me, look, Nick, if you're so clever, how about you run a clinical trial? And so in 2006, we started our first clinical trial, and we were really, frankly, blown away by the results. Most clinical trials take 3 years to run because you have to take a while to recruit people and work them through the protocol. We recruited 200 people in a month, and it was apparent that there was massive demand and appetite for this model of care. And not only was there massive demand, but the clinical outcomes were really strong. We were getting almost probably as good, if not better, clinical outcomes online than we were face-to-face in our face-to-face clinic. And that really was the start of it for us. And that led to lots of additional clinical trials, and it eventually led to MindSpot, which is our national service.
And mate, obviously, I think in Australia, most people out there would, we sort of have come through this men's mental health. I guess for the last 5 years, it's been a huge thing. But in your findings, are you finding that, the mental health is very similar for both genders? And is it just been because men have been, I guess, not typically sharing their feelings? And also, I remember you telling me something about a lot of the research that was being done with females. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, but there's also a background issue, and that is when we're talking about mental health, we probably need to be more specific about different subtypes. So men are more likely to have problems with substance use issues than females, but females are more likely to experience significant symptoms of depression and anxiety more than males. So overall patterns are, if you like, similar, but the way these conditions present are different depending on gender. Not for everybody. There's obviously crossover for people. So that's part of the equation. And you're right. A lot of the clinical trials are conducted with particular cohorts, because they're the cohorts of people who sign up for clinical trials. And it means that when you actually look at the research, you've got to be very careful to understand who are the people they targeted, who are the people they actually fronted up, and how generalizable are those results. So we're big believers in, you conduct your research in a controlled environment, but then you have to test and expand those outcomes in routine care, in everyday clinical practice, and compare the results.
Right. And the Mental Wills Foundation first got involved with you, I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago, for the things you do. And there's an intricate interplay between everyday actions and our mental health. Maybe could you elaborate on some of the key findings that highlight those impacts on our actions and our well-being?
Yeah, look, really happy to. So the Big Five has been a real passion for us, Vaughan. It started off basically by a very simple question: what are the things that we can all do each day to look after our mental health? And when we think about our physical health, we can all identify, for example, that we should drink water, and we should exercise, and we should brush our teeth. And not only are there actions, but there are also frequencies, that is how often we should do each of those. So any good health advice has something we can do in action and a recommended frequency. Now we recognize we didn't have that for mental health, and so we asked some very basic questions about, out of all the things people can do, what are the things which are most strongly linked to mental health, and secondly, how often should people do them? And we've now worked with more than 20,000 people, and we have found that consistently there are these 5, if you like, pillars or foundations, which we call the Big Five. And they include really obvious things, which most of us do, but often when people are struggling, they're not doing them enough. And one of the big findings for us is that there's almost a threshold for people. If you don't do them at least half the days of the week, you're likely to have poor mental health. But if you can just slowly nudge yourself to do them more often, your mental health will not only improve, but you'll get to a point where you'll actually have a really good quality of life. And we've, as I say, replicated these findings with large numbers of people. So we're really excited by the Big Five.
And I'm going to jump into the Big Five with you, but just while we're sort of around this area, it feels like from where I stand, there's a fairly large overprescription of antidepressants in this country. I could be wrong, but that's sort of the general feeling that I get. I seem to talk to a lot of people who just seem to have ended up on some form of pharmaceutical antidepressant, potentially without, trying some other avenues of dealing with your mental health. Is that a fair statement to make? And with the research that you're doing, is the effectiveness in particular with the big five something that people should be trying to go down that avenue first before looking at potentially a prescribed drug?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Vaughan, and it's a big issue. And to say that they've been overprescribed, I don't think we've got evidence for that. What we do know, and you're absolutely right, is that the rates of prescription are very high. I think in 21-22, according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, 18% of Australians, so over 4.5 million Australians, were prescribed some type of medication for their mental health, and about 75% of those medications were antidepressants. Now, what we do know is that GPs are under a lot of pressure. When someone goes to see a GP, they want something, and if a GP can't recommend something else, they'll do what we describe as a script reflex. They'll write a script. That's the reflex, and the consumer, the patient, will take that away. Now, a lot of people will fill the script, but they won't necessarily take the antidepressant properly. So you've got these 4.5 million people taking antidepressants, but not necessarily taking them in the prescribed way, which means that they won't necessarily get the right therapeutic benefit from them. Now, to say that they're prescribed, as I say, we don't know, because the GPs are trying to do the right thing. They're conducting their assessments. They're trying to support their patients. But the second point you raised, which is, are there other things we can do, other things that people should try? Absolutely. And what we're learning with the Big Five in particular is not only are these things important to do, but if you stop doing them, within a couple of weeks, your mental health will deteriorate, and you'll actually have symptoms of anxiety and depression. And if we think about lockdown in 21-22 across the country, particularly in Victoria, people stopped suddenly doing things they love doing. They stopped doing a lot of the Big Five. But when we have an accident, when we have an injury, I think you're dealing with an injury at the moment, it's really easy to stop doing things which are good for you. And if you don't replace those things, and if you're not aware of that, then before you know it, you can stop your routines, and you can start to find yourself in that downward spiral. And I think that's what's happening to a lot of our population. It's a tough time for society at the moment. And it's probably going to get tougher, frankly. So, we're passionate about the Big Five because we can see that this is a way for people to do things for themselves, to look after their mental health. Not a panacea, won't cure everybody, but for a good chunk of the population, we believe that it's probably a really sensible set of activities to do.
Unbelievable. With MindSpot, I think for everyone out there, mindspot.org is Australia's first and only free mental health online mental health clinic. Is that right?
Not quite. We're really lucky here in Australia. There are a number of federally funded online mental health services like MindSpot. And our URL, if anyone's looking for it, is mindspot.org.au. Almost got it. You went to mindspot.org. I'm not sure where you get to. But yeah, there are a number of services like ours, and look, we all deliver good services. We're really proud of the sector. The sector is really concerned about safety, quality, and that's something that's obviously critical for consumers, for referrers. It's good to be able to go to a service where you can get a good psychological assessment, good psychological treatment, and there's wraparound support around your experience.
So how do you do that? How do you navigate between, I guess, safety and effectiveness when deploying measures like online thing? That seems like a minefield to me.
Yeah, well, look, it can be, but the reality is we actually put in practice a lot of safety measures, and it starts off with good governance, and that is ensuring that all of our protocols are evidence-based, which means that we map them against best practice standards. We align with accreditation standards. We have external reviewers, but we also have a lot of staff training and protocols. We have exceptional staff at MindSpot and the other digital mental health services. But we engage in a meaningful way with people online. Although we talk about online, we really have to remember that digital is a tool. Digital is a tool for improving access. So you and I are talking digitally. I can conduct an assessment. I can ask you about your concerns. I can ask you about risk, and I can help you build a safety plan. And I can work out with you also what you might do if your symptoms deteriorate. But I can also check in with you on a regular basis, either in person, synchronous time, or using questionnaires and monitor and help you to stay safe. But the reality is people are actually benefiting significantly from these online services, providing that there are those layers of safety and governance and evaluation.
Yeah. Okay. Mate, this is off the, I knew this would happen. It could end up off script. But anyway, we're going. The other day when we caught up, and it's just come to me because this morning I did my Tuesday morning. We go down to Bronte, we do our ice bars, we do a little bit of breathing work, we watch the sun come up. It's fantastic with Alex Ross. Big shout out to you, Alex. Mental Wheels Foundation now sponsors that, and we pay for all the ice. I have to be very careful how I say we pay for ice, but I'm talking about the ice that goes in the bath. Everybody, don't get the wrong idea. But there was a lovely family down there this morning, and two of the kids were suffering from some anxiety, a bit of depression. The term ADHD came up a few times. We had a bit of a discussion about that, and it seems like that's a more prevalent thing. What's some good advice for parents on if their kids are starting to present with those questions? What should I guess their actions be as a worrying father or mother?
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. There's more cases, identified cases of ADHD, particularly amongst adults. And parents, it's wonderful that parents are aware and are doing something about it. First thing parents can do, of course, is to get informed. And obviously, you go to the organisations which you trust online, talk to your GP. To get some additional professional advice. But in addition, parents need to back themselves and know that when their son, their daughter are struggling with mental health concerns, that as a parent, they play a fantastic role in providing that unconditional regard, that support, that quiet reassurance, and supporting kids to actually, outside of those symptoms, have as normal a life as possible. The temptation is when a loved one is struggling, we want to wrap them in cotton wool. We want to isolate them from the world and give them time to rest and recover, whatever it might be, for all the right intentions. But the reality, of course, is that if we do that, we remove important sources of reinforcement, of fun, of stimulation, of challenge, the stuff which actually helps kids stay well and helps everybody stay well. So it's a fine line for parents. But I really recommend, obviously, seeking professional support and getting informed, but not to outsource the parenting, not to feel that they can't be not quite a therapist, but that support person in their child's life. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you very much. So let's jump into the big five: meaningful activities, healthy thinking, goals and plans, healthy routines, and social connections. They sound... when you first read them out, when I first read to people, some people sort of go, oh, hang on, why wasn't meditation in there? Or why wasn't this in there and that in there? Can you, I guess, give us a quick synopsis of how they sort of rose to the top as the top five?
Yeah, really good question. So when we first started this work many years ago, we trawled the literature, we trawled diagnostic systems, we trawled clinical assessment interviews, we trawled, old literature, we trawled biblical texts for trying to identify what over the millennia people have done to look after their mental health. We came up with a list of over 500 different things, and we over time, and they included, of course, mindfulness and exercise and talking to people and kindness and gratitude and you name it, it was on the list. What we did was we reduced the list over time by removing duplication. But we administered that list to 6,000 people, and we asked them how often they did those things in the previous week. But we also administered clinical measures of depression and anxiety and satisfaction with life, so different clinical validated tools. We looked at the relationships, and we found that all of those things were associated with mental health. There's no question about it. But the big five were the most important things. Now, what we found was the big five accounted for the vast majority of so-called variance. So when we looked at how much people's mental health varied, the big five accounted for probably about 80% of that. That's not to say that those other things aren't important, and we think that things like mindfulness, gratitude, they help when people are feeling well. But when people are struggling, it's the big five that matter. And at the moment, I'm running a clinical trial just with a small number of people, and the most important thing for these people who are struggling is the healthy routines. That's the first thing, because they're not getting out of bed at the set time, that they're going to bed at unusual times, they're not eating regular meals. So if they haven't got that building block, they can't do gratitude. They can't do the other stuff. We start there and we build up. So that's why we say building blocks.
Right. That's wow. Because we had a bit of a laugh the other week when we caught up too, when I said me and my boys went out gravel riding, and then we had a coffee, and we nearly ticked all of the big five in one foul swoop. And you said that's because you're in a good space. But if you're in a bad space, we need to be separating those five, don't we, and making sure that we're ticking off each of those five. Trying to do them every day.
And when we work with people with really who are really struggling with low mood, depression, and similar symptoms, they haven't got the energy to be kind to other people and show gratitude. They're just struggling. And so the first thing we do is we actually get them moving, and we give them structure. We help them regain that structure in their lives, and some very simple activities which can start to give them joy and hope. The other stuff is noise, frankly. And it's distracting, and it's not helpful. That's why I think the big five are a really good place for people to start.
You told me the other week also about honestly, after we had that conversation, I had to go and have a little moment and really think about it. But you said, and you can correct me. That's how we work, you and I. That you got a group of people who were high achieving in the big five, and you asked them to stop doing that. Can you talk us through that? Because that was super powerful for me.
Yeah, so it's actually the most recent clinical trial that we've run. We've run about 6 now, and it's only with a small sample of people. And the basic question is, we all know that doing things can help our mental health, whether it's physical exercise or social engagement or meaningful activities. But if we're right, if our theory and model, if you like, of mental health is correct, that is that we all have to reach a threshold of doing those activities every week to maintain good mental health, then the opposite should apply. That is, if we took those things away, we would see a deterioration in mental health. And so the aim of this trial was basically to test that. And if I understand correctly, it's probably the first time in the world that's been systematically tested,
Wow.
Which is a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, wow.
But obviously we ran it with a very small number of people. Everyone was very well informed from an informed consent perspective. Obviously we had our Human Research Ethics Committee at Macquarie University go over it carefully, and we had multiple safety nets around people. But we didn't know what to expect. But we basically were working with people who, as you say, were doing really well. They didn't have any symptoms of anxiety or depression. And for 2 weeks, we asked them to reduce the big five. That is how often they did the big five. We didn't ask them to stop. We just asked them to reduce. And we found what's called a dose response effect. That is, the more people reduced, the more their mental health deteriorated. And within 2 weeks, we found that most people experienced a significant deterioration in mental health. Some people went from the healthy range to a moderate range of depression symptoms. We then moved people into the recovery phase. We had a very planned sequence of phases. And in the recovery phase, we said, go for your life. Here's the list. You know what to do. And we'll encourage you to do as much as you can. Now, we obviously checked in with people every week and they completed questionnaires on a regular basis and so on. So we had really good visibility and lines of sight of how people were doing. But I think I shared this with you, Vaughan, what we learned was that it takes people about twice as long to recover as it took to deteriorate. And even really healthy people who were essentially doing incredibly well with life and really satisfied with their quality of life with no symptoms, if they significantly stop doing the big five, the things that are good for them, their mental health would deteriorate and would take them twice as long to recover. Now, the good news is everyone's recovered. That clinical trial is now more or less complete. And everyone at the end of the trial has said to me, Nick, that was an amazing experience. I really now understand just how important those basic things are for me to do. And we found that their mental health is probably a little bit better than what it was before. Not significantly so, because they were already doing really well. But it's quite a profound trial. And what it's showing basically is that not only are these things important to maintain good mental health, but if we stop doing them, we are going to deteriorate, and it takes us longer to recover.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I think everyone out there will, if it hit home as much as that hit home for me first time hearing it. And I think where it took me was that, when you get a significant loss, especially if you lose a family member or a partner, or you split up from a wife or whatever, it's very easy to then go and, like, the way that, especially, I think probably quite a lot of men will fix that, is to go out with the boys and get on the piss, right? And drinking becomes a thing, especially if you think about, I've had a few friends recently sort of suggest to me that they, after a parent had passed away, their drinking escalated quite rapidly, and then suddenly they weren't getting out of bed to do their normal training, and suddenly within 4 or 5 months they were like, "Shit, mate, I think I'm depressed." It's like, well, it was that moment, right? Like where it just needed that one little bump in the road to send you in a different direction, and then you start stopping doing the other big 5 things. So, yeah. That's thank you for sharing that.
That's a really good observation, Vaughan. And when we do experience loss like that, we grieve, and that's hardwired in us as a species. And we see it in other species. We see it in our pets, our dogs. If we have 2 dogs and one passes, the other dog grieves, just like the family will grieve. And when we grieve, we lose our energy. We go to a place which is a sad place naturally, as we're making sense of what happened, and we have that sense of loss and sadness. It can be really profound. But you're absolutely right. For some people, they lose their rhythm, and they lose the routines which sustain them. And going back several decades, if not hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, as a species, societies had traditions, they had rituals for grieving, and for the end of grieving as well, which marked occasions when you move from one phase to another. And I suspect a lot of that was actually in recognition of the fact that we all benefit from a trajectory, and sometimes we need a prompt and a nudge to move us into a recovery phase.
Wow. We're getting towards the end of our time, which feels like it's only been 10 minutes. God damn it. And so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. But one thing I did want to quickly tell Con is, like, at the Mental Wheels Foundation, we've been working on our little app called The Map. And we're excited to have that chat with you last week about starting to ask our community out there. We're about to jump into the sit-up challenge, and we're going to ask everyone to get onto our little app so we can start asking them some questions about how they're feeling and what the effects of doing 66 sit-ups every day for 21 days. So I guess if I could get you just to talk to the importance of continually trying to capture more data so we can feed it through to yourself and your team.
Yeah, look, I think it's a great initiative, not only the sit-up challenge, but also measuring outcomes, because you can then feed that information back to the team, the people involved. They can get insights and recognition about the things which are helping them. One of I think the difficult things for us as a species is cognitively, the way our brains are wired and the way we think. We live in the moment, and we of course project into the future, and we have recollection of the past, but we don't have a really fine-grained awareness of the things which affect us, the things which actually support our mental health or drop us down, or whatever it might be. By measuring these outcomes and by sharing that information with people, you develop a link between what people did and how they felt and what they thought. And that increases insight and awareness. And yeah, good for you guys. We're really happy to support that mission of yours.
Thanks, mate. All right, are you ready for the fast Big Five? I know, like, you came up with the Big Five, but I've got questions for you. You ready?
Go, Vaughan, go.
What is one thing you try to do every day that you truly believe in?
Okay, I try to manage my emotions, and what I mean by that is I try to do the opposite of some of my emotions. Trick I learned about 2 decades ago, and it rocks. So when I'm feeling really tired, like I'm hangry, so I'm preparing the kids' dinner, and the dog wants to go to the park, and the kids are nagging me about something for all the right reasons, and there's chaos in the kitchen. My temptation is to do the opposite. All my temptation is to snap, but I do the opposite. So I do the opposite of my symptoms. So instead of snapping, I pour love onto my kids. And that makes them feel great. They thrive, and it makes me feel great. And it's a very simple trick. Do the opposite of those negative emotions.
Brilliant. Name one thing that happened this week that was less than perfect, but perfectly okay.
All right. I have a medical condition at the moment. I've got a cardiac condition. It's not too serious, but it's really knocking me around. What it means is I don't have my usual get up and go. So I have had to say no to quite a few things, put things on the back burner, and be okay with it. And I've been okay with it. And that's a bit of self-care and self-respect, which, to be honest, I'm not good at, and I have to work on. But it's really nice when I do it.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm also glad. What is one goal you set and then achieved that gave you a lot of fulfillment?
Oh gosh, yeah, look, family adventure. Been promising the kids for a while to take them to Ningaloo Reef at Exmouth, West Coast, Australia, and we went there in June and caught up with my sister and her partner. We had a 5-day window, so we drove up in one day, 1,250k, and we ended up swimming with whale sharks and turtles, missile dugongs, humpback whales. Trip of a lifetime, bucket list. It was just amazing.
Fantastic.
We didn't have much time, but it was just wonderful.
Wow, thank you. Give me one part of your morning or evening routine that you can't live without.
Okay, this may sound unusual, but I'm an early waker. I get up at 3:45 every morning, 7 days a week, and I go through my usual routine in terms of ablutions and hydration, and then get a cup of coffee, sit down with my calendar and diary and organise myself, make sure I'm all set for the day. And that just sets me up beautifully. And it sounds really terrible and boring, but it keeps me going.
Excellent. And the last one, tell me about one conversation you had this week that made you feel really good.
I had a talk to our 12-year-old. He's a tween, and he's a great kid. And he's really frustrated, as all 12-year-olds are, about different things. And I helped him to realise that his frustration was because he wasn't getting what he wanted from his mum. He wasn't getting the attention. And instead of being frustrated with her, what he could do was help her to have a bit of mum time, even 20 minutes, half an hour, and negotiate and navigate with her that after she'd had a bit of a break, she'd be able to hang out with him for a bit. And so he was able to help her to feel good and at the same time manage his emotions and learn a pretty good lesson. It was a great moment.
Unreal. Mate, thank you. I'm just going to quickly have a look and see if there's any questions in here. Holistic Flow Remedial Massage said, great work watching here from Boona with Zach. Go, Zach. Okay, guys, thank you. Holiday before work, which is Jenny. She does a bit of work for us. She's a ledge. I can resonate with how things can go downhill when you stop doing the big five. Even though I didn't know them, what they were, I could see what changed and what I needed to add back. Excellent. All right, mate. Well, thank you so much for your time. You're an absolute legend, you really inspire us here at the Mental Wheels Foundation. And I hope we can do another chat like this again in the future.
Well, it's my pleasure. Hey, thanks so much for your time and keep up the good work. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. See you, mate.
Take care.